see if we have our commissioners with us tonight. Nice to see you all. Happy. I'm hearing a little feedback. Someone. Okay, well, good to see you all. I am calling this meeting to order, and today we will be talking about some background that'll help us to do our process effectively. We'll learn about how the city conducts its meetings in terms of the Rosenberg's rules of order, and we'll hear from a guest speaker talking about the redistricting process kind of generally. And let's start off with some introductions, just like we did last time. If you can start off with an introduction of yourself again, and what neighborhood you live in, not your district, what neighborhood you live in, and your favorite thing about your neighborhood, and then pass it to another member of the commission. So I'll start. I'm Teresa Alvarado. I live in the Little Portugal neighborhood. And on my block, I have 4 generations of one Portuguese family. And I love being a part of that. And I will kick it over to BJ.
Evening, everybody. I'm BJ Fatum. And I live in it, I guess it's considered the hub of the Cambrian, Willow Glen, Los Gatos district, kind of in a small pocket. And what I like about our neighborhood is twofold. One, we've got a lot of families that have been here for a while. We've seen the kids grow up and go to college and bring back their own kids. So it's been pretty consistent. And then we're in a great area as far as access to just about everything.
You want to pick someone, BJ, to hand it over to?
How about Caitlin?
Hi, my name is Caitlin, and I am from the Berryessa neighborhood. And my favorite thing about my neighborhood is that there are a lot of local small businesses. And I will pass it off to Lenka.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all here again. I'm Lenka Wright. I'm representing District 10. I live in the Campton Chase neighborhood. And I'd say what I like best about where I live is being so close to nature. We have great parks, hiking and biking trails. So it's really a great way to get out and be outdoors and meet your neighbors as well. And I will call on Jonathan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan. I live in the Westgate area. And what I really like about this area is there's a number of different ethnic restaurants that are easily walkable to, ranging from Philly cheesesteaks to Ethiopian to Mongolian and Japanese and the like. And I will kick it on over to Daisy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daisy. I am in District 3 downtown, and I love District 3, especially being so close to San Jose State still. It was where I did my bachelor degree. I moved here from Gonzales, so San Jose State always has good memories. And I just love the energy that downtown has as well. Let's see. Has Mark gone? Mark? No.
Oh, hi, hi, my name is Mark Vanny. I don't know, I was going to introduce myself. I'm with the City Attorney's Office, and my role here is to advise you guys on any legal questions, and I've just made it a practice to appear. I live in Cupertino, although I went to school in San Jose, and I've been a South Bay resident more or less my whole life. And I've lost track of who's next. So.
Sorry, I was talking to my dog there. How about Fred Sidbury? Fred, how about you? Would you like to introduce yourself? There we go.
Thank you. It's great to see everyone once again. I was safe. I'm Freddie Sidbury. I've been a member or a resident of District 7 for over 30 plus years. Um, I enjoy the area. To me, it's a safe area, and been very active in the community as long as we lived here. So I'm just ready to get going with our committee, our board, and see what changes that we can make in a positive manner. Thank you. Oh, anyone else I need to pass it to? Is everyone gone? Andrew, have you gone?
Okay, how about Enedina?
Oh,
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Enedina. I live over in South San Jose in the Edenvale neighborhood. And what I like is that there have been a lot of new parks that have been developed in recent years, and that there are a lot of trails that are an easy drive away.
And I was mistaken. I think, Andrew, you haven't gone. Is that right?
Not yet. That's
Great.
that's no problem. My name's Andrew Dittlefson. I live in the North Willow Glen neighborhood. My favorite thing about the neighborhood is twofold: walking distance to the downtown area, both downtown San Jose and downtown Willow Glen. And then we have a lot of very young families, particularly on my street, which is nice.
Thank you all. The other folks on the line are city staff or our guest speaker. So we'll move on to item 2, which is public record, and we do not have any public record to discuss today. So we'll move on to the consent calendar, which includes the commission minutes from our February meeting. I want to ask if there's any comment from commissioners about the minutes. And if not, I will ask for public comment on this item and ask city staff if there's anyone in the public who would like to comment on this item.
Blair Beekman.
Go ahead, Tony. You want to facilitate that?
Yes, I realized I didn't have my timer open. So Blair, go ahead and
Hi.
can start.
Blair, yeah. Hi, Blair Beekman. I'll be real short. Thank you for the meeting today. Thank you for this process. And I think I mentioned before when this was being deliberated 6 months ago in City Council, you know, there's Brown Act ideas that can help, you know, all sides of the issue of redistricting this meeting and redistricting issues, and Brown Act ideas that started from the SAG committee process actually, and that all sides shouldn't be fearful of the good Brown Act ideas that came from that time and can be used in a variety of ways. And I just wanted to re-mention that at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman. Is there anyone else, Tony?
No, Blair was the only speaker.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve our consent calendar?
I would move to approve.
Thank you, BJ. A second?
Sure, I will second that.
That was Jonathan. Thank you so
Yes.
much. All in favor? Aye.
And we do need to do a roll. We have to do a roll call vote for anything that's teleconferenced.
Perfect. Go ahead. Thank you.
Andrew,
Aye.
BJ,
Aye.
Daisy,
Hi.
and Adina,
Aye.
Freddie.
He said aye, but he is muted.
Thank you. Jonathan,
Aye.
Caitlin,
Aye.
Lenka,
Aye.
Ramon, Sylvia, Teresa.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 4, we do not have any reports, but I just wanted to ask commissioners to please use the raise hand feature at the bottom of our Zoom page. Once we get into discussion, it helps because it'll rank who raised their hands first, which is so much easier than trying to do it visually. So appreciate that. We don't have a public hearing item, and we do not have any old business either. So we're going to move right into new business, and I will hand it over to our city clerk, Tony Tabor.
Did we want to take the items out of order? We have Jonathan Meta Stein from Common Cause.
I don't know what Jonathan's schedule is like. Jonathan, do you want to stick around and hear about Rosenberg's rules of order?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm flexible and can work with your calendar. If you're open to the idea of having me present now, I'm able to do that as well.
Sure, that'd be great. Actually, let's do that then. Tony, would you like to introduce Jonathan?
Yes, Jonathan is the Executive Director of California Common Cause. I'm going to make him co-host in case he wants to share a screen.
So just for clarity, we're going to item B under new business first.
Okay.
Thanks for being here, Jonathan.
Hey, Madam Chair, thank you, and members of the commission. It's lovely to join you this evening. I am Jonathan Meta Stein. I am the Executive Director of California Common Cause. Let me pull up my presentation for you. Screen share. Okay, and then. Okay, that should be in presenter mode, yes? Perfect.
Yep, so there we go.
Fantastic. Great, so you may be wondering who California Common Cause is. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to building a democracy here in California at the state and local level. That includes everyone. We work on voting rights, redistricting, money in politics, and other democracy issues to end structural inequities in our state and local democracies, and to create government that is accountable to and reflective of all of California's communities. We are very strong supporters of independent redistricting and redistricting processes that are as inclusive, as accessible, and as participatory as possible. And to this end, we were lead advocates and co-architects of the California Citizens Redistricting Commission at the state level, which is now a model for independent community-driven redistricting all over the nation, and has been emulated in states across the nation and in cities and counties across California. And we partner with community organizations, good government organizations, civic engagement organizations, and others to engage community in local redistricting processes. So I've been invited today to present a redistricting 101 to you. And so what we're going to cover today is what is redistricting, why is redistricting important to our communities, and how can you create a fair, transparent, and inclusive redistricting process in San Jose. Now, some of this may be background for you, some of it may be something you're very familiar with, but I think it's useful to go over it anyway. I will note there's a couple things that are not in this presentation today. So one is the law of redistricting. Critically important subject, of course, something you'll need to be familiar with and something I can talk about in Q&A if you're interested. But in a lot of cases, if we get to specifics, I'm going to defer to your local council, who will have a firmer grasp of local rules than I do. The other thing that this doesn't tackle, because it would take a whole separate presentation, is how to engineer your community education and engagement practices so that you are able to educate and empower as many community members as possible. But we can talk a little bit about that in Q&A as well. Okay, so first thing that is important to know is in the United States Constitution, it requires that political districts of the same type, i.e. all city council districts within a city, have the same number of residents. This is the principle of population equality. The goal of population equality is to make sure that each legislator represents the same number of people and that people have the same access to representation. So in this city, we have 20 people. Let's say we have 4 council districts. That means you want 5 people in each district in order to have population equality. This is true for all levels of government: congressional districts, state legislative districts, city council districts, school board districts, and so on. Now, over time, however, people move, children are born, people pass away, economic conditions shift, gentrification and displacement happen. And what that means is that certain areas of a city or a state have population growth and other have population decreases, right? And you use the census in order to count where people have moved, and then you have to redraw your districts in order to ensure population equality. So in this instance, you have people who have moved to what looks like the east side of the city. and you redraw the districts in a new way because you've gone from 20 to 24 people. You now have six people in each district, right? So that was the process of redistricting. Now, the fact of the matter is that district lines can empower and they can disempower. They can lift up community voice and they can silence community voice. So in this instance, you have a hypothetical city in which you have a minority group. And in this instance, it could be a racial or ethnic minority. It could be the LGBT community. It could be folks who care about a specific environmental justice concern. It could be folks who are interested in a particular business district. It doesn't really matter. If you were to draw district lines in one particular way, right, you could end up in a situation in which a community that is 1/4 of the city is split into 4 different districts. And so now all of a sudden you don't have any particular district in which they have influence, and you don't have any particular city council member that needs to listen to their concerns. Now, I want to really highlight for you that this happens even though the districts drawn are really simple geometric shapes. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, those are squares. There can't possibly be gerrymandering going on if there's just squares. Gerrymandering is the process of using redistricting to disempower a minority group, a racial minority group, a political minority group, or any kind of minority group. And oftentimes, gerrymandering is associated with long, crazy-looking, squiggly lines in districts. And in this instance, you have a situation where that's not the case. Simple geometric shapes are able to disenfranchise a community. And this is what happens when you have bad district lines. Now, you take the exact same community, right? And you draw district lines in a slightly different way. Now, all of a sudden, the minority community in question is likely to influence the political outcomes in one particular district and is likely to have a voice on city council in one of 4 districts. Now, I want to be really clear that the point here is not to have proportional representation. In this instance, the minority group we're looking at is 1/4 of the city and would likely have influence in 1/4 of the council districts. But it is not as formulaic as that in reality. It is not that directly proportional or that black and white. The point, though, overall, is that you don't want to draw districts that intentionally or inadvertently disenfranchise any San Jose communities. You want to do the work to know communities well, to hear from them and what they want, in order to draw district lines that uplift the community. Now, the Federal Voting Rights Act is in play here without question. And in this particular instance, depending on specific conditions and histories within this hypothetical city, it might be the case that the Federal Voting Rights Act actually requires that you draw a district in which this minority community is able to elect representation. But I won't go further into the VRA here. We can talk about it more in question and answer. And of course, you'll have legal counsel who's able to provide a much, much deeper set of insights. So let's talk a little bit about the history of redistricting in California and how we've seen a shift in how redistricting is done in this state. So what is California's redistricting story? On September 12th, 2001, a day after the terrorist attacks of 9/11, the state legislature rushed through a vote to pass new district lines for the full decade of the aughts that essentially enacted a sweetheart deal between Democrat incumbents and Republican incumbents. It was not, as we have seen in some other states, a partisan gerrymander in which the party in control did everything it could to wring as much power as they could out of the district lines, right? So in states around the nation, we have seen Republicans gerrymander Democrats and minimize Democratic power. We've also seen a fewer number of instances, but still we've seen instances in which Democratic-controlled lawmakers, legislatures, have tried to gerrymander Republicans in order to maximize Democratic power. That is not what happened in California. What we saw instead was that Democrats and Republicans in the state legislature drew the lines they knew that would enable everybody to get reelected and to entrench incumbency power, okay? And that meant really negative consequences for communities on the ground. And I want to illustrate one particular example for you, okay? So if we were in person, I would ask you what community you might think this is. But because I'm presenting, frankly, I can't even see your faces in most cases. So I'm going to assume you're guessing Wisconsin or Pittsburgh or upstate New York. In reality, this photo is from Watts in Southern California. On November 12th of 2003, a freak storm dumped 5 inches of rain and hail on Watts, of course, a working class community of color. It overwhelmed the infrastructure of Watts, which is not prepared for freak hailstorms like this. About 150 buildings and homes were heavily damaged. 50,000 people lost power. 6,000 people sought emergency aid from the county's emergency services. But the leaders of Watts had an impossible time accessing help from state government or federal government. Why was that? Well, of course, you have historic legacies of disempowerment and disenfranchisement along the lines of class and race, but you also have political districts that contribute to that disenfranchisement. So because of the incumbency protection shenanigans that the state legislature used to redraw district lines in 2001, it split Watts, which is the green part of the map in front of you, into 3 congressional districts. So no congressional representative felt that Watts was their responsibility. It also split Watts into 3 state Senate districts. So no state senator felt that Watts was their responsibility. And no one felt that they needed to listen to leadership in Watts. This was a quote from a congressional staffer at the time. He said, "At the time of the 2003 flood, I remember our office trying to be very responsive, but there was a lot of ping-ponging of constituents between elected representatives. Watts is cut into 3 different congressional and state Senate districts. Residents who live on the same street might live in different districts. There was a lot of unnecessary frustration for constituents during a difficult time. This would have never happened if all of Watts belonged in one district." So that was not the only instance of gerrymandering of communities by the powers that be in California. This was Long Beach, in which they drew these what's known as the Long Beach boot in order to keep a particular politician's house in Senate District 28. And that cut Long Beach into 3 state Senate districts and split the Black community, making it harder for the Black community to achieve voice and representation. Okay? Now you might be thinking to yourself, surely this doesn't happen at the city level in California. I assure you it does. So this is a much more recent example from the city of Martinez. It's not a redistricting, it's a districting. The city of Martinez was using at-large elections, and because of a threat of a lawsuit, was forced to move to district elections. All the city council members lived near each other in the center part of the city that you can sort of see there, right under the number 3, you can see it, where the city is split into 3 really thin ribbons. And what was done here was an honest drawing of districts here that actually honored Martinez's communities as they really live on the ground, would have grouped a number of incumbents into the same district or districts, and they would have had to run against each other. So in order to avoid that, what do? They drew these districts that have these long, thin ribbons. And if you know Martinez's communities, they've split Latinx communities, they split other neighborhoods in order to make this happen, okay? So these sorts of incumbency protection shenanigans happened in California's history at the state level, and they've happened at the city level. The alternative was to move to a redistricting commission. In 2008, an unusual coalition of folks came together to support moving California's redistricting process to an independent redistricting commission staffed by regular Californians that would put the community first. The woman speaking at the podium is Kathy Fung. She was the former executive director of California Common Cause. We were a primary advocate of that commission, and behind her is Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then behind him is advocates from the AARP. At the time, the Citizens Redistricting Commission, the ballot proposition in 2008, was opposed by the state's Democratic Party and the state's Republican Party. And over time, it has become so embraced as a best practice that H.R. 1, the For the People Act, now in the state Senate, now in the U.S. Senate, this is the democracy reform mega bill that is being debated by Congress right now, and backed by every member of the Democratic House, and almost so far every member of the Democratic Senate. It would make independent redistricting commissions, California style, mandatory in every state in the nation. So it's gone from something that was a revolutionary idea to something that is very mainstream. We ended up with a Citizens Redistricting Commission in the 2010 cycle that was broadly representative of the state's gender diversity, racial and ethnic diversity, and geographic diversity. And guess what? When you put regular folks in the driver's seat, you get better process, right? So they held over 100 meetings in 32 cities over an 8-month period. The public really showed up. It is incredible to see members of the public who one might not think are deeply tied into something as wonky and as nerdy as redistricting step forward and make their voices heard. And they really, really did in the last cycle. And guess what? Not only do you get better process, you get better outcomes for communities on the ground. These are the congressional districts that surround the city of Watts. Watts is now part of one congressional district and speaks with one voice. So that redistricting revolution that started with the State Redistricting Commission has spread to cities and counties across California. There are a number of cities and counties that have independent redistricting commissions. There are lots of advisory redistricting commissions like yourselves, and there are hybrid redistricting commissions that in some way sort of combine the qualities of both. How can you in San Jose create a transparent and inclusive process? The first thing I want to emphasize for you is that the delay of redistricting data from the Census Bureau, which recently announced it will not publish redistricting data until September 30, 2021, and the state will then take 30 days to make adjustments and refinements to that data, meaning that you will not have redistricting data until the end of October 2021. That is a blessing and a curse. It is a curse in the sense that people have to go back and revisit all their timelines, all their deadlines. I think your city charter has a deadline for your work. You may have already discussed this, or you may be discussing it soon, but you have a deadline in your city charter, and I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work or what you're going to do about it, given that this census data is so delayed. So it creates a lot of confusion, and we can talk in question and answer if you'd like about what's happening around resetting those deadlines. There's a huge set of multi-stakeholder conversations going on now about how we fix that. But it's also a blessing. It gives you much, much more time to go into the community, to educate, to engage, and to empower. This is a difficult, esoteric, wonky subject, and it is going to take you months to educate the community so that you don't just have the same regular folks who will participate at every city council meeting or every planning commission meeting driving this process. You really want to put all of San Jose's communities, regardless of their previous level of engagement in your local politics, in the driver's seat in this process. And you have the opportunity to devise an outreach plan, a language access plan, a disability access plan, and other things because of the extra months you'll have available to you. We are here to provide legal support, technical advice, best practices. We have a website I'm going to share with you at the end of this presentation, but it's also, if you've been, I assume you've been to the City of San Jose's redistricting website, it has a link to our hub of resources, materials, and trainings. It has, for example, a document that outlines all the legal requirements, and then right next to the legal requirements, it outlines best practices for how to implement those legal requirements in a way that maximizes community engagement and participation, okay? We also are leading a training in early April on 2 different community mapping tools that are meant to give the community the ability, it is meant to lower barriers to participation, essentially, in the redistricting process. In years gone by, community members have come forward, they have made their voices heard, they have given testimony, they have either given verbal testimony or written testimony, but then really demographers with sophisticated mapping tools are the ones who draw the maps. We're in a new era, however, and simple online mapping tools allow the community to map their communities of interest, map their individual districts, or even map the entire city council district map. And they can submit those to you as accompaniments to their written testimony or their public testimony. So I encourage you to look at those tools and dedicate some time to training around those tools. And I'm happy to share with your city clerk a link to our training that we're doing in early April, which will be modeling two of those tools for our attendees. There's also lots of training that you need to really absorb. And this is another benefit of having extra months in your timeline. You can really take the time to hear, to get the training that you need. I will say that there are people who were redistricting commissioners in the state commission in 2010 who are true believers in redistricting commissions. They really want to see groups like yours succeed. They would be happy to do a presentation to you and teach you what they learned in their experience 10 years ago. There are folks who served on city commissions in mid-decade districting processes who would be happy to share their experiences. And there's plenty of experts out there right now who are doing lots and lots of trainings. What are some subjects for training that you might want to put on your radar? And maybe you've already discussed this. One is there's lots of laws at the federal level, the state level, and in your city charter that govern redistricting in the city of San Jose. And you're going to probably want a training specifically on the law. I'm happy to answer some basic questions today and question to answer if you are interested. And we are partnering with the ACLU of California to publish a guide on redistricting law that will come out within the next month. Second, what is a community of interest and how do you gather community of interest testimony? So community of interest testimony is going to become your best friend over the next year of your life or however long it takes you to complete this process. People will be coming forward by the hundreds to provide their community of interest testimony to you. What exactly is a community of interest? It's a really vague term, and it does not have a concrete definition by design. And it will take you some time to get familiar with the idea of communities of interest, and how you can gather community of interest testimony. And then last, how do you do outreach to the community, to community leaders, to community organizations, to ethnic media and groups that serve youth or limited English speaking, non-English speaking communities, people with disabilities, communities of color, low-income communities, the LGBT community, and so on. How do you get out into the community and reach people where they're at? You have the time to build a community outreach plan. And there's lots of resources and trainings available to help you do that. Just earlier this year, we presented a training for city clerks and county clerks across California. We had almost 300 attendees from cities and counties across California. And I led a panel on this specific topic. How do you do community outreach well in a local redistricting process? So there's plenty to learn from in the time that you have available to you. For those of you who are visual learners, this helped me. Some key pieces of a good redistricting process. First, you want to center community and community input. Then you want to create a transparent and inclusive process that people can access and people can believe in. And finally, you want to take all that, put it together, and you want to propose equitable district maps that are fair and honest and represent the community to your city council. What does that actually look like? Here's some photos from the city of Sunnyvale's districting process. Now, this is pre-COVID, obviously, and it sort of freaks me out to see people talking this close to each other without wearing masks. But the person on the right is Jackie Guzman, deputy city manager, also very pregnant in this photo, just out there pounding the pavement, doing her job. She is taking redistricting to the people. In the city of Sunnyvale, as they were going through their districting process a couple years ago, they held dozens and dozens of events out in the community. They didn't wait for people to come to them. They went to folks. They got input via online surveys, through community events, pop-ups. And then you can see in the photo in the top left, after they had draft maps, they took those draft maps out into the community so people could take a look at them. And they sort of walked through the pros and cons of each map and who was supporting each one so community could vote. And then they came back to their city council and said, here are the results of our online surveys. Here are the results of the informal straw polls that we're taking at farmers markets and other community events. They really took redistricting to, in that case, it was districting, but in your case, it would be redistricting. They really took it to the people and engaged the community. You're welcome to reach out to us, though you might be more likely to do that through your city clerk and city staff. That's a website that we use for redistricting inquiries. And the link I have here, .org/local redistricting 2021, is our hub for local redistricting resources, tools, trainings, materials, and so on. And we're going to be adding, I think it's 8 more tools and resources in the next few weeks. So it's under construction, but there's plenty there, including that 3-hour training we hosted for city clerks and county clerks earlier this year. And with that, I will stop screen sharing I thank you for your time and for listening. And I wish you enormous luck in this process you have in front of you. It is critically important. And you can devise a process, last word for me, you can devise a process that creates years of increased civic participation and civic engagement from San Jose's communities if you get this right. So I'm wishing you all the luck in the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jonathan. And we did send out the long 3.5-hour training to all the commissioners after the first meeting, and we look forward to other resources. I'm sure we have questions from commissioners. Do we have any hands up? I do see Jonathan.
Yeah, hi. So, Mr. Stein, you mentioned that the Census Bureau is going to be late in putting out the report to the state, and then the state will take longer to get it to us. Do you know if that will also affect the Census Bureau putting their results up on their own website for us to both view and download for stuff like our own ArcGIS mapping?
So is your question whether you're able to use the census data to begin doing something with it before the state adjusted census data is available?
I suppose so.
Yeah, so let me back up and share a little bit about what we're talking about. So the Census Bureau will release data on September 30th, 2021. The state of California has ended prison gerrymandering, which was the practice of, and still used in many states, of counting people who are incarcerated in the often very small rural towns where incarceration facilities exist. And so you have like a small town of 10,000 people, and for the purposes of redistricting in the census, they'd have 15,000 people. Why? Because 5,000 of those folks were incarcerated in a state prison. So California, instead, it counts folks who are incarcerated where they last lived prior to incarceration. It counts them in their actual communities instead of where they happen to be in jail or in prison. The state needs a month to redistribute people back to their home communities and to do other data checks and so on. And so the question I think that you're asking is, can you start working with the data starting September 30th instead of waiting for that month for the state to do its readjustment of the data? I would really caution you to not make any concrete conclusions using that data prior to the state adjustments, because you may frankly not only misunderstand how many people are in particular communities, but also might end up getting a Voting Rights Act analysis wrong. So, for example, you might say to yourself, okay, under the Federal Voting Rights Act, certain conditions need to be met in order to mandate what's called a Section 2 district, a majority-minority district. Well, looking at this data, there aren't any Section 2 districts that are required. But then you get the state-adjusted data, and oops, turns out the population is different than you realized, and this law actually does require what's called a Section 2 district. So what demographers would recommend is that you can look at that data to begin getting a sense of things, to do some visualizations perhaps, or to get familiar with the terrain. But don't start drawing maps that then anchor your ideas and your thinking for the process going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Lenka.
Hi, good evening. Mr. Stein, thank you. That was a great presentation. And my question concerns what this commission can do to best inform and educate the community about the redistricting process. So specifically, what would you say is the biggest misconception about redistricting?
Oh, that's a interesting question. Well, okay, so the first thing I would say, the biggest misconception among the public is different from the biggest misconception among people who actually draw lines like yourselves. So let me answer both. The biggest misconception among the public is that you have to be a data expert or a politics guru in order to participate in the process. In reality, community members need to be able to do one thing, and that's come to you to describe their community for you. They need to be able to say, here's where I live, here's where my community lives, here's where we work, here's where we worship, here's where we gather, here's where we play, here's where our kids go to school, right? My community is X, it lives in this area, and I hope that you'll keep it together in one community, one council district, right? It's as simple as that. We create, we're going to publish this in just a few weeks, essentially paint by numbers community of interest testimony templates. Basically enable community members to simplify the process of giving you testimony, right? Now, in order to hold you accountable to drawing good maps, there have to be lawyers and there have to be demographers and there have to be people familiar with sophisticated mapping tools. But for a regular community member, just to participate, all they need to be able to do is come to you to tell their story and tell the story of their community, okay? And so you need to make clear to the community the barrier to entry is lower than they might think, okay? One of the biggest misconceptions among line drawers, and there's several, is something I tried to touch on earlier, which is the misconception that any sort of funny looking district is gerrymandering. The reality is that simple geometric shapes are not always the best districts because communities don't live in simple geometric shapes. The point of districts is to honor communities on the ground and where they live, so that communities that have shared history, shared culture, shared identity, shared interests are kept together kept whole, so they can join together, advocate for themselves, and achieve representation, right? The purpose is not to draw rectangles or squares or triangles or whatever the case may be, right? And so sometimes line drawers see a funny looking district with a rounded corner or a squiggly line or something, and they're thinking to themselves, well, that's gerrymandering. Surely that can't be right. In reality, it might be that you have a historically Vietnamese part of town, and there was a church that has been a cornerstone of the Vietnamese community for decades. And you wanted to join that church with the population center within the Vietnamese community. And so you have a district that has a jut out so you can include the church, right? That's a totally legitimate reason why you might have a funny corner or a squiggly line on a district, because it honors communities on the ground.
Thank you. Caitlin.
All right. Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I did have a question about how we should do outreach to the public. So I believe the Redistricting Commission this year is supposed to adopt the provisions of the California Citizens Redistricting Commission, where we are not able to receive communication or communicate with other people about redistricting matters outside of a public hearing. So do you have any advice about how we can bring redistricting information to other people if we're not able to do it outside of a public hearing?
Yeah, so you're gonna have to talk to your council and influence them about what the district line should look like. But the commission has said that still gives us broad flexibility to do a couple things. One is we can do all the community education in the world. So state commissioners are now out talking to community organizations, talking to interest groups, just doing redistricting education out across California. That's happening now. It's going to happen a lot over the next several months. The other thing that the commission at the state level has done is they've said we can create committees. And one committee will be about language access, one will be about disability access, one will be about outreach, one will be about budget, one will be about hiring, and so on and so on. And those committee members can go talk to experts in those fields to gather advice. They can't hear input on what the district line should look like, but they can get all sorts of information. What are best practices around redistricting outreach? What are best practices around language access? All these things, right? They can do that. And the other thing I would suggest, Commissioner, is you can go and hear from I really advocate taking redistricting to the people. Don't wait for them to come to you. So go join a community meeting of a small, community organization rooted in a particular district. All you have to do is publicly notice that meeting so that the public knows it's happening. And then you can send 2 commissioners or 3 commissioners or 5 commissioners or 1 commissioner even to that community organization, and that community organization can give testimony where they're comfortable, in their nonprofit office or in their church or in a restaurant, in a cafe, in a community center, right? And you can do them in language. Like you can say, okay, we have a commissioner who speaks Spanish. We're going to do a redistricting hearing in a church that has a predominantly Spanish-speaking congregation. And we're going to publicly notice it so people know that it's happening. you can, you can take it to the people in that way, and you can conduct the entire thing in Spanish if you want, right? All that's possible, even with the sort of, at least that's my interpretation. All of that is possible, even with the limitation you have that prohibits you from hearing, from people behind closed doors.
And I know we will be hearing from the city attorney's office on that matter. Are there any other questions for Jonathan? Any reflections on what you heard? It's a little daunting now, hearing the possibilities. I guess that's the thing, I mean, it could be, we could do an incredible amount of outreach. And given that we have more time, that's great. I guess it's just a matter of what we can manage and do so in a way and have all of our processes going forward be as inclusive as possible. It'll be interesting as we start transitioning back to in-person life, how this can change, right? How the outreach can change as we go forward. And we have engaged Redistricting Partners, which is a consulting firm, and they are going to be joining us, we hope, next meeting to talk about the schedule, start hearing from commissioners about an outreach process and get our ideas. And of course, San Jose is a very large city, so we have a number of other commissions already in place. We have a neighborhood associations commission where we could, of course, do outreach through those neighborhood associations that exist throughout the city. So I think we have a lot of resources that are available to us. I guess one question I have for you, Jonathan, is that we have, every council member has a newsletter distribution list, which is, they're pretty extensive. Could we send, I know there's a bit of a firewall between us and sitting electeds. Would that be an appropriate level or outreach mechanism?
You'd want to double check with city staff and council, but I don't see any reason why they couldn't use their outreach lists just to educate and inform the community about your meetings and where the community might learn more about redistricting.
Right.
I saw an additional hand.
Yeah, Freddie, I think I saw your hand up.
Well, yeah, you hit the question that I wanted to ask. That's not good, because the thing is, at this particular time, we we have our hands tied because we're not able to get out in the public until hopefully very soon. I just think that the idea of using our city council representatives and their leverage and their power to start now getting information out to the public, to their district, and look, this is what we're starting to do. And we will be calling upon you as community members and organizations to be a strong participant in this project. I'm hoping that what we're doing or going to try to do is don't create a model that we feel will be perfect for each one of these districts. Because the thing is, one model is not going to fit District 7 or District 8 or whatever district it is because of makeup of that district. So we want to make sure that we have that in mind. So I'm hoping the city council and the mayor and the city manager take into consideration that, for the time being, we're going to have to get a budget put in place to get this information out to our citizens.
Thank you, Freddie. One final question, Jonathan, without kind of biasing our thinking about, I've been trying to get us to talk about our neighborhoods versus our districts, to separate ourselves and to help us think a little bit more openly about what could come in terms of the data that we receive. How open should we be to, completely shifting, or what advice would you give us in that regard?
It's hard for me to say. I think what you should do is collect an enormous volume of input about where neighborhood lines are, where school district lines are, where service catchment areas are for different nonprofits and service providers. Look at all the different ways in which communities are grouped within your city, and then take in tons of public testimony, because there is just lots the public will teach you. I know all of you know San Jose well, I know, but you will learn so much from listening to the community about their own lived experience, right, in the city of San Jose. And then it's up to you to decide, like, do the districts that we have currently reflect our communities on the ground? Maybe they do, you know, and you're just fine tuning. Maybe they don't, or maybe they do in some areas and maybe they don't in others. It's entirely up to you after you've heard from the community and gathered all the inputs.
Fantastic.
It's
Thank
also,
you.
by the way, sorry, last note on that,
No.
population shifts are going to really determine that too. You know, if you've seen really massive population shifts within the city of San Jose or out of the city of San Jose, it may be the case that you don't have the choice of keeping districts largely the same, because a certain part of town might have lost so many people, you have to change the district in order to get to population equality.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for all that you've done for our state and now apparently our country, and creating a process that is inclusive and transparent. And I'm sure we will have you back. You're welcome anytime. And I know you're all over the state. I've seen you as part of the Sunnyvale League of Women Voters and other public forums. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to join you this evening.
Thanks. I'm going to see if we have any public comment on this item. I'll give folks a moment to raise their hands in case they'd like to comment. And I don't see any hands raised. City Clerk, is that correct?
Yeah, there are no hands raised.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. Well, let's move on to item A under new business, which is voting procedures and Rosenberg's rules of order training. Hi, Tony.
So exciting. I get to do all of the exciting topics: Brown Act, rules of order. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the special rules you guys have that you actually mentioned in the previous item about ex parte communication. But the first thing, I'm looking at the Rosenberg's rules of order. Now, Rosenberg's rules of order was created by a former council member. I think his name is Dave Rosenberg, City of Davis. He took out all of the stuff from Robert's Rules of Order that applies to cities. So he didn't create a new set of rules. He's taking Robert's Rules of Order, but there's a lot of things in Robert's Rules of Order, and I have a copy of it right here. It's very thick. This is Robert's Rules of Order. But a lot of that doesn't apply to public agencies in the city or in the state of California, because we have the Brown Act that we already went over. So he pulled things out. So we've been using Rosenberg's. All cities have been switching over to using Rosenberg's. What I attached to your agenda was the League of California Cities Rosenberg's Rules of Order. The one I used to use was this from a janky website. So this is all nice and pretty, but it's still the same thing from Dave Rosenberg. So I'm not going to go through all of this because I'm going to go through the cheat sheet instead. The cheat sheet that I also attached to the agenda is a little easier. I just have so many of these things open. I want to make sure. So the purpose of rules of order, whether it's Roberts or and Rosenberg's, is to just have an orderly meeting so people know what's going on. The rules are not there to punish people. They're not there to stop discussion. So we're pretty loose with the rules. Robert's Rules of Order does not allow for friendly amendments, but we do friendly amendments here at the City of San Jose. Almost all cities do. If somebody needs to complain about the noise, here, I'll go ahead and share. We don't necessarily say point of privilege. So if you look at this Robert's Rules cheat sheet, which is also Rosenberg's cheat sheet, I move that we adjourn. You don't really need to move to adjourn in the state of California because you can't talk about anything once you've hit the end of your agenda. So the meeting is over. But a lot of people like to move to adjourn because it just gives you that finality. But like complain about noise, room temperature. If somebody says like, excuse me, clerk, it's really cold in here or something, and they don't say point of privilege, we don't stop the meeting. It's like, well, you didn't say it correctly. So That's not what this is for, but it is to help you if you are uncomfortable with saying, hey, it's kind of cold in here. You have a way to bring those things in that would make you feel more comfortable. So if you say point of privilege, it could just make you feel better. But this cheat sheet is really to help you. A lot of you haven't been in these formal type commission board meeting type settings, and it's to help you get through a meeting smoothly. I move that we table this item to suspend further consideration of something. If you want to end debate, you can call to question. Call to question, though, is not used very often in like a civil discussion until you've gone through everybody. So everybody's had a turn, and maybe now you notice, well, we're going through the same people. They're all saying the same thing over again. So I'm going to call to question. Calling to question means that you're ending debate and you want to vote on the motion. So you may hear that. You can amend the motion, council, and you'll see in red here, it says council often uses the term friendly amendment. In Robert's Rules of Order, you would formally say, I move that this motion be amended. We don't really do that. We just say, hey, I'd like to offer a friendly amendment. Can we also add an additional public hearing to talk about language access or whatever you want to add to a friendly amendment? And then the mover and seconder would just say, yeah, I'm okay with adding that. Or they might say, I think it's a really good idea, but I don't want to add that to the motion. In which case, then you could do a substitute motion to include what you want to do. So this top section are the ones you're going to use the most. And then we have point of order. This is if somebody breaks a rule. You don't hear this too often at the city of San Jose. Point of information, if you're requesting information, point of information, Mr. Attorney, can you let us know if we're allowed to do this? Like if you think somebody is going into a discussion, you don't think we're even allowed to be there, you could ask point of information, kind of interrupt, ask the attorney for clarification, and then we get back to the discussion. Then there's some other things I've never heard, like ask for a vote by actual count to verify a voice vote. I call for a division of the House. I've never seen that. So some of these are just things we're not going to do. I wanted to go over Rosenberg's Rules of Order just because I know not everybody's done this. So procedures for handling a motion. I think this is the most important part, is just to listen to the other side. When it's your turn, you speak. When it's somebody else's turn, let them speak, and be civil and polite. Occasionally in my career, I've had to go into, and it's not necessarily here at the city of San Jose because I've been a city clerk in other cities. I've occasionally had to go in to lecture a group of people in being civil and polite. So I don't think we're going to have that issue with the redistricting commission, but that is something, discussions can get heated. How to accomplish what you want to do in meetings. We've kind of scripted it for you. So if you want to propose a new idea, you make a main motion, Madam Chair, or Chair Alvarado, I move that, and then you state your motion. You can make an amendment. I move that the motion be amended by adding the following words. You don't necessarily have to say I move that. You could say I'd like to amend my motion. If you want to refer it back to a committee, say if you guys have a subcommittee on community outreach, you might want to refer something to a subcommittee. You currently don't have one. And then I move to limit discussion to 2 minutes per speaker. The chair has the discretion to already do that. And then just how to adjourn. Permission to withdraw a motion. You don't need permission. You can just say, I'm withdrawing my motion. So you can do that. And we've had that occasionally happen at council. Somebody makes a motion and then they hear further discussion and it's like, oh, I realize I don't need to make that motion. I'm withdrawing it. Because maybe they were moving something that they didn't realize staff has already done the work on. And then again, the point of privilege, there's too much noise, I can't hear. The room is too cold, I can't think. I'm in my garage right now, so I think I'm focusing on cold rooms. Point of information to ask again, the attorney or the city clerk, point of information, are we allowed to do this? And then I would be like, yes, or let me look that up. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Any questions on Rosenberg's rules of order?
Yeah, let's
Then
take a
into what you
moment.
guys are.
Let's take a moment just to make sure that hopefully, you know, that we have a consensus process. I don't necessarily think that, you know, we're going to be pulling out the Rosenberg's rules list, but it's good to have that in our back pocket. Freddie, yes.
Well, just simply, we know we're giving the community approximately 2 minutes, if that's still they're going to be the standard. But what about the commissioners ourselves? What do we have a time limit when
That's
we're
a great
speaking?
point. That's a great point. It is
That's-
helpful.
That is up to you guys and the chair.
Yeah, I think that is a helpful practice. Freddie, would you have a recommendation? I mean, I think 3 minutes could be a fair limit when we're deliberating. What do you think?
Yeah, 3 minutes was the norm when I was on the other commissions, but you know, we can all, I guess, vote on what we want to do.
And it doesn't preclude anyone from speaking more than once, but at least it gives every one of the commissioners a chance to weigh in.
Right.
Do folks
think
feel comfortable with that? Is there any objection to that idea? And we don't have to be hard and fast. I don't know if we're going to put up the timer or anything, but just a general sense that, you know, 3 minutes for our comments. Great. Thank you for bringing that up, Freddie. Okay. Tony, you want to continue?
Yeah, BJ, oh, it looks like he took his hand down.
No, I just had, and I think you've already addressed it, but I agree with that. As long as we have the flexibility, if somebody's in the middle of a thought, and it's really important that the chair can say, keep going, and then find an appropriate time to terminate.
Okay.
Sounds good. You have my commitment.
The next thing I wanted to talk about, and Mark is here to answer questions, is the specific items that are only for redistricting commission. I'm going to go ahead and share the resolution again, because I think it's easier for all looking at the same document. So you have 120 days from the date the redistricting counts are delivered to the states. So as Jonathan from Common Cause said, we had a due date that was like based on the calendar, but we had a charter amendment in November that allowed us to, if the data is delayed, that the council can set a new date by resolution, and that's one of the things we just did with this resolution. The city charter under state and federal law, you are to recommend districts to the council that provide racial minorities with an equal opportunity to participate in the political process and do not dilute or diminish their ability to elect candidates of choice, whether alone or in coalition with others. And that was sort of also covered by Jonathan in the Common Cause presentation. So for meetings, we are to have a minimum, this is our minimums. This does not mean this is all we're going to do. But the minimums is one meeting in each council district, to the extent practical and consistent with public health orders. You know, we'll start off virtual. If we're able to go into in-person meetings later, we can do that. I definitely, even if we were to start in-person meetings next week, I'd want to at least have one virtual meeting, because I think it's a really good way for the disabled to participate without having to come into council. So, and same with people who are using public transportation. So I really do like having virtual meetings. I think it's good for people. So the new notice for those meetings shall be placed in the newspaper. So once we get that meeting schedule, we'll publish a notice in Post Record. At least one meeting shall be on the subject of redistricting principles, and at least 2 meetings shall be conducted in Spanish, Vietnamese, and English with notice provided in papers specific to those languages. That's again, that's the minimum. It doesn't mean we can't exceed that. I do expect we'll exceed the number of meetings that are translated or have interpretation. So this is the part that I'm not used to, but so we wanted to make sure we covered it. The commissioners and city staff may not communicate with or receive communication about redistricting matters from anyone outside of a public meeting. This does not prohibit communication between commission, city staff, legal counsel, and consultants that is otherwise permitted by law outside of a public meeting. And it does not prohibit city staff from receiving communication about redistricting matters for the purpose of disseminating communication at a public meeting of the Redistricting Commission. That means people can send letters to the city clerk, and I can post them onto your agenda. All communication concerning redistricting from elected officials shall be made orally during public comment or in written comments submitted to the Redistricting Commission and published online. So this means you cannot, as much as you may want to just go talk to your the council member in your district and sort of get a feel for, like, maybe they can tell you about communities of interest. Don't do that. It needs to be done in
Tony, before you move on, can you scroll back to where you were?
Yep.
So item A confuses me. I feel like the first sentence and the second sentence are counter to one another. I understand the third sentence, but I don't understand how we may not communicate or receive communications about redistricting, and then it doesn't prohibit us from. I don't understand what is it specifically that we are prohibited from discussing, or what is it that is not prohibited?
I think that's a Mark question.
Sure. I'm happy to answer that question. So looking at, just so that everybody knows, this section, subsection A of this resolution is modeled after the provision in the Elections Code dealing with the Independent Redistricting Commission at the state level. As I understand it, that both the commissioners and city staff, we can't engage in any public facing communications. So going out to, public community meetings and things like that, and on an individual basis and talking with constituents, that's not allowed unless it occurs during a public meeting. The second sentence, this paragraph does not prohibit communication between commissioners, city staff, etc. What that allows for is internal communication. Say a commissioner wants to ask me a question about something or wants to ask the clerk about something, that's permitted. That type of internal communication is okay. It's just the public facing communication that's not okay unless it's at a public meeting. And then the last paragraph just allows city staff to receive letters, things like that, and post it online so that the public can see it. Now, the second section, B, that deals with conduct of elected officials. I mean, in some respect, it's the same, but it's because elected officials are members of the public, but it is putting a requirement on them that's explicit, that if they're going to communicate with commissioners, it needs to be made orally during the meeting, during public comment, or they need to submit something in writing so that the public can see it. So in some respect, yes, it's duplicative, but it is calling out elected officials specifically that given their position, these are rules that they must follow. And then, as you said, you understood the last subsection C, but if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer as well.
I think BJ has a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So in thinking through and the presentation, if we're looking to get some input in the interim from the public and education, more the outreach, if we wanted to reach out to the district, the council member of the district to put something on the agenda, or if they're going to have a town, for example, if they're having town hall meeting, or if they're going to do a newsletter and we wanted for the redistricting to get some education from the public and to get some information, to gather the information from the public. Is that also prohibited just to say, can we set up a town meeting? Or if you're going to have a town meeting, can we put this on the agenda so I can get some input from the general public in that district?
I would say for logistic purposes, to try to establish, the location of a public meeting and things like that, that would be appropriate. I think when we get into issues of the substance of redistricting, things like communities of interest and the like, that would be prohibited. We'll have to take this on a somewhat case-by-case basis as the issues arise. But generally speaking, I think I understand your question. If you're trying to facilitate a public outreach that will be at a public meeting, there is some communication that needs to happen in order to do that. And that could be done in writing would be good. I don't know if the city clerk has established a public portal for that type of information, but that would be my suggestion, since the goal here is for increased transparency. Doing things in writing as a body is good. Having the clerk, directing the clerk to take certain actions at a public meeting would be appropriate as well.
Let me make two suggestions. One is, at our next meeting, I'm hoping our consultant will be joining us, and we will have a conversation about an outreach plan. I would like to have consistency so that we know that we are equitably reaching out to the residents of San Jose, and have similar information that we're using and figuring out what are the channels that we will use to reach out to folks. So I think we have another month or whatever to have a conversation about this process and develop a plan together. But I have a question for you all. We can establish a subcommittee of our commission to work on some recommended outreach, to work on a draft outreach plan. And then, of course, bring it back to our commission for further discussion, and we can, make sure we integrate that with the work plan of our consultant. So if there are folks who want to spend a little bit more time kind of devising a draft work plan, that would be great. Linka, I know you have a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to also just add to what you were requesting, if we could also look at social media guidance as far as with the outreach, because I know I wanted to share, come join us at our meeting, but in light of what we're restricted in doing, I wanted to make sure I was abiding by what we are allowed to do and what we're not. Thank you.
We cannot establish a subcommittee at this meeting because it's not agendized, but we could do it at the next one. So if that's a subcommittee people are interested in being on, they have a month to think about it.
Great. And maybe we talk about that with the consultant and see if it's worthwhile to get a few members of our commission to kind of work on an outreach plan. Great.
Okay,
ahead,
so
Tony.
for A and B. So C, commissioners may not express an opinion about how the council district boundaries should be redrawn outside of a public meeting or until the redistricting counts from the 2020 census are reviewed by the redistricting commission and public comment is concluded. So it's basically kind of like when you're on a jury and the judge tells you not to make an opinion until you get all the facts of the case. We're asking the same thing here. Don't form an opinion until you hear from everybody, because you may think the city of San Jose, but there may be a neighborhood or a neighborhood identity that you don't even know of, that you've never heard of. So I think that's a really important one. The public wants to know that their input is going to be heard. And if somebody's out there saying, oh, well, I just think we should leave the boundaries exactly the way they are, or we don't need to really hear anything, that's really going to hurt the integrity of the public process. And then commissioner removal. A commissioner may only be removed by the appointing council member for that district for good cause. and with confirmation by a majority vote of the redistricting commission. So.
And I wanted to ask the city attorney, are there requirements for attendance? And are there any thresholds that would prohibit a commissioner from continuing if they miss a certain number of meetings?
Well, one of the criteria under the municipal code, the sections that were included do have mandatory meeting requirements and things like that. I believe, and the clerk's office may know the specific number off the top of her head, but I think 3 unexcused absences will be cause for removal. Moving away or moving outside of the area, outside of the city would be one as well. So those type of things are required, as well as there is council policy 0-4 as well, which sets forth parameters for boards and commissions.
Maybe we can take a look at that. Before
Yeah,
the
I
next
can
meeting.
actually, I pulled up that municipal code.
Thank you, Tony.
I may not have shared the right screen though, so. For other commissions, this is automatically deemed vacant, but it looks to me like it would not be an automatic removal. You guys would need to vote on it, and Mark can tell me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you guys need to vote on it, and that the person making
That's
the
correct.
amendment-
Yeah, so because of that, that's correct. Yeah, if any of these things came up, that would be a basis for removal. And yeah, you'd be able to vote on it.
So, we have, there's all of these would be judged immediately vacant. If they resign, obviously, absence from the state for more than 60 days, conviction of a felony, refusal to file the official oath. But you guys have all done that. And then it also mentioned 2.08.60, and that is it's different for every commission, so I don't know it off the top of my head. Consecutive regular meetings of the board. So that would be like the last meeting was a regular meeting. This is a regular meeting. The one on the 3rd Thursday of April is a regular meeting. So those 3 in a row, a person could be resigned in our normal course. But for this one, the council member would need to agree, and then you guys would also need to vote on whether to remove that person or not. And then it's also a percentage, more than 20% of the total number of regular meetings. So if somebody attends like in January and then April, and then, if they could hit that 20% threshold, even if they're attending some meetings, if they miss a lot of the regular meetings. But that's regular meetings. So when we have communities of interest special meetings, are those going to be considered regular meetings or special meetings? If they're special meetings, then that doesn't apply. So that's something we would need to talk about, I think, as we set those public hearings. But if somebody,
I wonder if, and obviously this is not something we can act on, but I would love to get the commissioners' feedback on consideration of maybe asking the council to appoint a couple of at-large members as alternates or something, just in case. It's such an important process, and we want to make sure we have enough commissioners that are able to commit to being involved throughout the course of the year. I don't know. What do you guys think? Yes, Freddie.
Well, if we do that, are they going to, what district will they come from? I mean, is it going to be District 7 or 8? Because what you're saying is that we're going to have, let's say this, 2 sideline individuals, or we're going to have 7 sideline, a person from each district to replace that one person that's probably be removed or whatever. Am I making sense there? Because
you are. What I was suggesting. Sorry.
If you want full representation from each district, how are you going to do that?
I was just thinking of a couple of at-large members that don't represent a district as kind of floating alternates. But I'm not trying to devise a strategy here. I just in case something happens, do we want, it's not up to us, obviously, it's up to the council. And this just popped into my head. So I'm not proposing anything. I just wanted to get feedback from folks, but if it doesn't feel like it's a concern, then we'll just move on.
And there are provisions for excused absences. So if somebody tells me ahead of the meeting, or even after the meeting, I was sick or my child was sick, that's an excused absence. So that excused absence doesn't count towards the 3 consecutive meetings. So say if somebody had a child sick last month, but this month they just didn't feel like coming, this is the first month of a 3 meeting consecutive, not last month.
Okay.
And that is really all I had to present. And I was questions because I ex parte communication thing it can be really tricky because you really want to talk to your council member, but it's like, don't.
Any other questions for the city clerk? Yes, Freddie.
On the point you made just now, if your child is sick, would that member be able to use this format as far as communicating with the other members of the other members? In other words, would they be able to zoom into a meeting instead of not actually being present in the meeting if your child is sick?
When we're in person, the problem we have with doing hybrid meetings in person is the technology in our meeting rooms doesn't really handle it very well. We get terrible audio feedback when we do hybrid meetings like that. So it's not something we want to do until the system can be upgraded. They can call in. We've done call-ins, so somebody could call in and listen on a phone, but the Zoom in our meeting rooms doesn't really work well unless you're just all on it. Like it's just one big room with like me in that room watching it. But it's just, you get that audio feedback that sometimes you hear in a meeting. You might be watching a council meeting and you might hear some feedback. It's because they may be watching the meeting on their television at the same time. So it's that kind of thing. I am asking people who miss the meeting to watch the meeting. So one advantage you guys have that other commissions don't have is that if somebody has to miss the meeting because their child is sick, they can watch the meeting and see Jonathan's presentation and they can see what I said. So the next meeting they'll come in, they won't be behind. They'll have already heard all of that thing, all of those things. Another commission, like my Board of Fair Campaigning Political Practices, that's not broadcast. So if somebody misses a meeting there, they just have to read the minutes to find out what happened for the recording. So it is easier. Somebody might be home with their sick kid. They can't participate via Zoom because, you have crying babies, but maybe they can have it up on YouTube. I know my meetings are almost always on YouTube in my house. I walk in, it's like, I hear me. It's a lot of times it's delayed. So we're always watching it here. I have the only kids who sit around watching the City of San Jose council meetings.
Especially because they don't live in the city of San Jose.
They don't.
That's so funny. Any other questions or comments for our city clerk or for our city attorney representative? Thank you both for being here. I know that they're both going to be continue to join, and obviously Tony will be here, but Mark, hopefully you'll continue to be available to us if we have questions in the future. Great.
Sorry, my phone just talked.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know if you guys heard that. Or not my phone, my watch.
Let's see if we have any public comment on this item. I don't see any raised hands. but I'll give it another.
Blair
Oh,
Beekman just
there's
raised
one.
his hand.
Yes. Mr. Beekman.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Thank you for the past two items. I hope I can quickly offer that on the previous item, I was very impressed with the ideas of wanting to work on redistricting issues from based on ideas from 2001 and the time of 9/11, and that was a call to the previous speaker lecturer that there are ways we can redistrict ourselves, and I thought that was interesting in the fact that I work with technology and open public policy, and it's really important that we can develop a future at this time when we enter an emergency state in the future by developing good practices and good ideals now, that when we enter an emergency state again, we don't fall back into bad habits and bad thinking that allows, what was the redistricting issues that the previous lecturer mentioned at the time of 9/11 that we're trying to address now and work out of. And it's building, just really good sound practices now and to be aware and be prepared how to do that. That can help us in times of emergency in the future. And thanks for your patience to hear me out on that. Thank you.
Thank you for staying with us. Okay, I see no other hands raised. So we will move on to item 8, which is public comment. Members of the public are invited to speak on any items that do not appear on today's agenda, but that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of this body. Are there any public comments? Yes.
Blair Beekman.
Yes, please, Mr. Beekman.
Hi, thank you. I guess I should have saved my last thoughts for this item of public comment. I just wanted to politely remind of the importance of East Side San Jose issues and how we're working towards an understanding of both sides of San Jose and how that can be a oneness and for all sides to be included in the ideas of reimagine and equity. And there's a really good concepts, and we're learning that it can be okay to talk about, and that they're basically are just our better ideals, how to address the future ideas of peace, basically how to address our past 20 years of war, basically, and question our military industrial technology complex that this country has developed. And right now we're in a process of what can be better democratic practices at the local level that can very much address how to build that more peaceful future. It's democratic practices that can build a peaceful, sustainable future. And that's a great concept to consider, and how to invite ourselves to more work on that, especially in these sorts of times. It's nice work. So good luck in how you will continue to work on these issues. And it's the work that I do with open public policy and accountability for technology that and reimagine and equity. It's all part of an important purpose that thank you for your efforts in what we're all adding to at this time.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? I don't see any. So we'll move on to item 9, meeting schedule and agenda items. So Jonathan spoke about having, folks who have been involved in previous redistricting or districting committees to share their insights. And we definitely intend to continue to invite speakers to share their insights, in addition to our, intention to bring redistricting partners and talk with you commissioners about a public outreach plan. We are intending to invite speakers as well to continue to share insights with us about previous processes. But if you have anyone in mind that you've heard, that you saw a webinar that you think would be helpful, please do send that along to us. Tony, do you want to talk about the schedule and agenda?
Yeah, we kind of tentatively did third week of third
Yeah.
Thursday of every month at the last meeting, and I just wanted to reconfirm that. We have the next one, I believe it's April 15th. I wanted to confirm the third Thursday still working for everybody. And we'll have a more detailed schedule once the consultant's on board to schedule out those communities of interest public hearings.
Great. Okay, I think that's it. Anything else before we adjourn? Do we need a motion to adjourn, Tony?
You don't need it, but it's always nice.
Okay, can we have a motion to adjourn?
Sure, I will motion for us to adjourn.
Thank you, Jonathan. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
BJ, thank you so much. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for your time this evening. See you next time.